Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace your current golf grip with a new one in the easiest way possible, using the least amount of tools and more importantly making the least amount of mess. Now, to regrip your golf clubs at home you'll just need a few things, one of those being some double-sided tape, which you can buy either the proper stuff like this or just some clear stuff which you can buy for just a couple of pound. Then either a hook blade, which will be the easiest way to rip off the old grip, or a Stanley knife can do the job just as well if you don't have a hook blade. Something to slide the grip on with, so like white spirit does the job. If you're not in the UK, I think it's called mineral spirits or something similar to that. You can get proper grip solution. The main difference between that and sort of white spirit type stuff is that this stuff smells a lot worse and it can also sting your hands quite a bit, but it does work just as well. And then of course you'll just need the actual grip that you're going to put on. Because I'm using white spirit, I also like to wear a glove just on the left hand, and you'll also find it easier for the method that I'm showing to use a T for plugging the end of the grip, along with a paintbrush as well, which you don't necessarily need, but I'll show you the reason for using that later on in the video. So to start with, just going to remove the old grip. If you do want to keep your old grip, then you can get a rod like this, so just a couple of pound off Temu, and I'll show how to use that in a separate video at a later date. But for today I'm just going to rip it off. You will find it easier using a vise if you can secure it into a vise. If you have one, that will make life 10 times easier. If not, it is still possible to do without one. You might just find it a bit more challenging if you haven't done one before. Just before we rip it, if you know that your old grip is in the correct position and it's been done by either the manufacturer or you're happy with where it's at, when you're doing this yourself without a proper gripping station, it is sometimes easier just to mark the line straight down where you want it lined up when you put the new one on. So for example, when we're putting the new grip on, we can just make sure that the line at the top, the notch there, and the notch at the bottom are in line with the notch on the previous one, so we know that it's lined up in the right position. Like I say, you probably just find that easier doing it that way if you haven't got a proper gripping station. So yeah, using the hook blade, I'm just going to slide that all the way down the grip and just make an incision all the way to the top. If you're doing it on a graphite shaft, you do need to be careful you're not actually cutting into the shaft itself, which is quite easy to do with a Stanley knife or the hook blade. Sometimes maybe even worth just rolling up the top bit first and then cutting it, just because if you end up finding that you have a shorter grip than the current one, or you end up extending it in the future or something like that, if you cut into the graphite at the bottom, it's going to look like quite a bit of a mess when there's a cut sticking underneath the bottom of the grip, if that makes sense. So just something to watch out for. Steel isn't really too much of a problem because you can't really cut into the steel that easy. Now, some grips will be more difficult than others, but a lot of the time they are usually pretty straightforward and do just tend to peel straight off once you cut it. And if you need to make more incisions in it, then obviously you can do. Like if you're doing a super stroke or something quite thick, then it might just take a couple more cuts to do it, and that'll just peel all the way off like so. Now the next part is probably the worst part about regripping a club, and it's removing the old tape. Sometimes, like with these ones, you find that it's actually really easy to peel off, but in other cases you find, depending on what type of tape they use, it can be an absolute nightmare. So you can get something like this, which costs about 20 quid, I think I bought this for, and you can basically just use it to remove the tape. Sometimes I don't find it works that great. If you're not really doing many regrips, I don't think it's really worth investing in one of these. You actually find the easiest way to do it is just heat it up and burn the tape off. Well, I mean, another solution is you can just put the new tape over the old tape and just have it slightly a bit thicker if you're not too bothered about that. But if you want to do a proper job and do it properly, then it is always best practice to remove the old tape, which more times than not doesn't take too long, in fairness. Like this one's just dead straightforward and not an issue at all. So once you've stripped it down to the bare metal, then it's time to put the new tape on. Now this is one that I'm going to be using, and for myself I like to have a few extra layers of tape on it. Instead of actually using double-sided tape, like the proper golf one is a bit more expensive than normal tape, so when I'm layering up I just like to use something like duct tape just to thicken it out a bit more. It's just a bit of a cheaper way to do it than using proper double-sided tape. So when you're cutting your tape, obviously you want to mark out how long it is compared to the grip that you're putting on. I always like to cut a bit extra of anything at the bottom. So basically when you're marking out on the shaft, you need to give yourself a bit of extra room at the top, just because normally there is a bit of thickness at the top of the grip, so it doesn't actually go all the way down. And if you are using more layers of tape, it's going to thicken the grip out, so it's going to stretch more, which means it's not going to go down as far as what it would do when you putting it next to the shaft like that. And it is always better to do it a bit shorter on the shaft than too long, because there's nothing worse than seeing the tape stick out underneath the grip once you put it on. So as I'm putting quite a few layers on, I'm going to put it just a bit on top, so roughly about there. which will give quite a bit of room to play with, because there's not really any harm in having the grip stick down under the tape. Still, it's not going to twist or anything if the rest of it's stuck down. Basically, I'm just going to try and wrap that round without trying to make as little creases as possible, which is sometimes easier said than done, especially with duct tape. But if you do find it does crease slightly, it's not the end of the world, and you're not really going to feel it unless you're using like a really thin grip, which you don't really find, but that's gone round pretty well. And with the top bit, because when you cut a bit extra, you can just tie that up and stick it down the shaft, and that will just stop any white spirit or solution or anything going down the inside of the shaft and causing it to rust in the future. Now, I like to have the bottom half a bit thicker than the top half, because it just helps me to feel like I don't flip the face over as much. So usually just sticking out with 2 extra layers of tape on the bottom like that. Now you might be wondering why you wouldn't just use like a +4 grip, which is designed to do that same thing. Well, it's not always possible to find a +4, and not every grip obviously does a +4 option. This is just a sort of nice alternative for using one of them. Then when you've laid it up with as much as you want to layer it up with, you can go ahead and put the double-sided tape on, peel the back off before you put it all the way round, and you'll find it a lot easier to get rid of any creases in it. And again, just tighten it off at the end and shove that down the inside of the shaft. And now this is the part where it normally gets quite messy, but with this little trick that I've got, you shouldn't really be making too much of a mess. So let me just show you how I do it. So you just need to make sure the bottle's not completely full here, because when you dip the shaft in, which is what we're going to do, it will overflow if the bottle is completely full. So I'm just going to take the shaft, I'm just going to dip it straight in here like so. Just give it a bit of a whirl around. It's probably not going to go all the way to the end, so there is going to be a bit that still needs doing. Just going to shake that off slightly and just try not to get it everywhere. Put that back into place. And then for the bit that it didn't quite reach, like it's still quite dry up at the top here, I'm just going to use the paintbrush. So this is what the paintbrush was for. You dip that in there and just coat the bit that it didn't quite get, just making sure that all of the tape is just pretty wet. It doesn't actually smell too bad either. Like white spirit normally does really smell, but using this sort of technique, it doesn't actually get the smell too bad. So once that's covered and it's all pretty wet, just before I put it into the grip, I'm just going to put my glove on, because if you get white spirit in your nails and if you've got a cut or anything, then you really do know about it. I'm going to take the grip, I'm going to shove the T down in the end of it like so, just to stop it coming out the end. And then I'm just going to fill that up from this side. Again, trying not to spill it everywhere. You don't actually need to fill this all the way to the top. Probably about 3/4 of the way is plenty enough, even half to be fair, just as long as you've got quite a bit in there. So basically, if you put your glove hand on that bit, which is obviously going to get wet, which is why I put the glove on, and then just hold the T at the other end and just give it a good shake about. That just gets all the inside of the grip nice and wet and just makes it a lot easier to slide on. But once you have given it a shake, you can just pour that back into the bottle. Then we can take the T out, and the grip is then ready to go on. So depending on how you want it lining up and depending on what type of grip you've got, if you're using a vice, like I say, it's a lot easier if you just try to get the logo or anything directly on top, like I said before, with that line there marks for the grip is. If you just try and aim to get it lined up with that, then you'll be obviously in the right place. Or you're doing it freehand or by eye without a vice, and you just want to try and get the leading edge or the bottom groove lined up straight with something. If it's in a vice, you can just get it sat so that it's pointing straight up towards the sky, and then when you put the grip on, you just want that to be directly on top as well. Or if you're doing it on the floor against something, so say you've got some wood or something on the floor, just try and get it lined up directly in line with the line on the floor, and then you can slide the grip on straight down. But like I say, just having that marker there on the shaft makes it so much easier. And if you have done this properly and you've used enough spirit, then you should find it pretty easy just to slide on, and it shouldn't really be much of an issue. And you'll also have quite a bit of time just to slide it about to make sure that it is in correct position. Like it'll be probably 15-20 minutes maybe before it sets properly, so you have got a bit of time to move it around. I mean, it's entirely up to you how you set it. I mean, Bubba Watson sets his at like a 45-degree angle because he likes playing a fade on it, but I'm just going to try and get this lined up straight down the shaft in line with that black marker there, and I know that that's going to be set in the perfect position. So there's literally no mess over the grip at all, just a tiny bit that's come out the bottom, so just going to give that a quick wipe with some tissue. Nothing on my hand, nothing on this hand, just a bit on the glove which you can just take off and get rid of. And that is how you re-grip your golf club at home, creating no mess with as little tools as possible. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff, and thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.